Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. As always, I'm Matt Meehan. I hope my name didn't change, but I'm alongside my partner and co-host, Mr. Luigi, the Professor, Rosa Bianco. What's going on, Lou? How are you?
Matt, how are you, partner? We got a big treat today. This is like a trifecta. We've got a company that is a disruptor, just went public, and hires some real great homegrown USA talent. Last time we had this many vowels on the show, Vanna White got carpal tunnel. It's Jason Muccioli. How are you, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here, my man. We really appreciate it. So you got a lot of exciting things going on right now with Li-Cycle. You guys just went public, right? You've been with the company for a while. I think they're really new. They're about 5 years old, right? You want to tell us how what your role is over at Li-Cycle, and then we'll get a little bit of your background story.
So for those that don't know, Li-Cycle is a lithium-ion battery recycling company. So as Matt mentioned, they were founded just 5 years ago. It's a relatively new problem, and they've been really aggressive about going after it. So they brought me on a few months ago to help with their business development in the transportation sector, so passenger cars and commercial vehicles. And I'll continue to help us grow our customer accounts in all the new sectors and with the new customers.
That's awesome. So how did you actually wind up with Li-Cycle? I mean, because you have a pretty diverse background, but you specialized in one area, and it kind of seems like you went a different route. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've been in the automotive world for over a decade now. Started out as an engineer by education and started my career at GM. Got experience with a few other suppliers, Dana, A123, and all in the electrification space. So really interested in electric vehicles. And over the past few years, I saw this problem with, end of life. What happens to electric vehicles, really to any electronics, when you can no longer use them? Where do the batteries go? And I luckily found Li-Cycle, which is trying to solve that same problem and recycle the batteries in a sustainable way rather than burning them off or putting them in landfills. So I was able to find a position that fit with my background, and I joined the team.
So before Li-Cycle, let me ask you this. What was the normal process of getting rid of these ion batteries that just weren't useful anymore? Yeah,
so a lot of lithium-ion batteries today, a big portion of the battery is burned off to just get the really valuable materials in the battery. So the most valuable materials are cobalt and nickel. And then a lot of the other materials are just burned off because there's not as much value there, and it's difficult to separate them out. And so Li-Cycle, instead of using a thermal process where some of our competitors burn the batteries, we use chemicals to separate out the other materials. So we're able to recycle everything. We don't put anything in the landfills. We have very little air emissions. It's a much more sustainable approach, rather than basically burning off the battery and having it be emitted into the air.
So Jay, let me ask you this. It seems like a very technical field to get in. Technically speaking, what is your educational background?
Yeah, it's very technical. I don't even understand all of it myself. So I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to University of Michigan for my bachelor's in engineering. And from there, like I said, I was able to get an internship with General Motors, and that's how I started my career. And at the time, that's when GM was first getting into electric vehicles. So think the Chevy Volt with a V and some of their other hybrids. And so that really piqued my interest. It sort of seemed like that's the future of where transportation was going to go. And since that first job, I continued to grow in the electrification space.
Now, Jason, you seem to be literally at the avant-garde of your space. How much, and this is for all our listeners, how much did your educational background help you? And, obviously having those letters at the end of the name help you get a good salary. But from a real life perspective, how much is on the job training? Because you're in a field that changes. It's so amorphous. It's changing weekly. So how much is on the job training, and how much do you rely upon your past history?
Yeah, good question. I think the engineering education is really good to like train your mindset of how you think and how you address problems. And so it sort of gives you a good base of how to deal with different situations once you get in the real world. But I think on the job experience is also huge, as you pointed out. I think a lot of value I bring to the table is just the experience that I've been able to grow from not only working at GM, but some of the other auto suppliers I worked at, and then using that experience going forward to bring on new customers, understand the problems that they're dealing with, and help address them going forward.
Wonderful. Now, Jay, tell us a little bit about the culture in the company. What's changed over the last few months with the excitement of going public versus being employed by a private firm? And you have the luxury now of being employed with a public firm previously with GM, went to a private firm that went public. So you have a really interesting insight.
Yeah, I'd say in general, the team has been really great since I've joined. I've been really impressed with just the depth of skill set of our executive team. Not only have they been able to manage us as a small startup, but I see them doing a great job being able to continue managing us as we grow. And as we've gone public, there's definitely been a change. Now we have a stock price that everyone constantly looks at, but the end goal is still the same of the company, that we're still trying to create a sustainable solution for batteries and recycling them. So that hasn't changed. But now by being public, we've also been able to raise a significant amount of capital that's helping us to continue to grow and grow more aggressively. And I think one of the biggest competitive advantages that Li-Cycle has is being at the right place at the right time, sort of that first mover advantage, and growing very aggressively and iterating on that. So we've been, I'd say, one of the first lithium-ion battery cycles in North America. We're now the leader in North America. And by raising this capital, we're going to continue to push that lead and continue to iterate on our processes and continue to grow as fast as possible.
Where is your industry going? What's the next generation of battery, and what's the next generation of battery recycling? Because ultimately, we only have one Earth, and there's only this finite resources. There's only so much cobalt we can keep mining. So what's the next generation have in store for your industry as a whole?
Yeah, so not getting too technical into batteries, but there's a lot of different kinds of lithium-ion batteries. And with our process, we try to basically accept all of them. So we were able to take in any type of lithium-ion battery. So it can be from any electric vehicle, the Tesla Model 3, the Chevrolet Bolt. And then once the batteries go through a process, we break it down to the raw ingredients. So those raw ingredients can go into any new type of battery. We're trying to remain as agnostic as possible to these different chemistries and technologies. We don't want to make a bet on one, and then, like you said, maybe it only lasts for a few years and we have trouble or we're obsolete in a few years later. So we've made a process where we can be very flexible, and that helps us accommodate our different customers that we're able to find. As they bring in new technologies, we're able to still accept those technologies. So I don't know where the future will go, if a certain chemistry or a certain type of battery will be the leader, but our process is flexible enough that we can accept these different batteries, and then we break them down to a component that can go back into any type of batteries.
Jason, how do you find it a challenge in educating the American consumer? We live in a very disposable mindset. You get something, it doesn't work, you throw it in the garbage. How do you, it's easy to convince corporate America to recycle because there are financial advantages to it. But how do you convince the head of household that it's so critical to recycle?
Yeah, that's definitely one of our biggest challenges and why I was brought on the team. I mean, not only the general public, just educating the companies. A lot of companies we deal with don't even know we exist and don't even know there's a solution to recycling batteries. And one of the biggest challenges we deal with is educating them that there is a solution and there is an economic benefit to recycling batteries. So there's a lot of valuable materials in those batteries, and we're able to extract that and make it economically feasible to recycle those batteries. So beyond just the corporate America, once people have vehicles, electric vehicles that get old, we have that challenge of making them aware that there's still value in their vehicle. So when they go to trade them in or take them to a scrapyard, they might be able to recycle them and get a larger value for them.
Let me geek out on you, Jason, a little bit. If you have, let's say, a precious metal, cobalt, whatever it may be from that battery, once you go through your chemical recycling process, is that precious metal still at 100% use, or is there a certain deterioration in that recycling process?
Yeah, so for cobalt specifically, so we're able to recycle several different materials, and the key ones, like you mentioned, cobalt and nickel, we say we're able to get above or up to 95% recycling rate. And those materials are pure enough to go back into batteries. So the cobalt and nickel, they go back into the battery industry. There's other materials that we do recycle as well, and they may not go back into batteries, but we find other homes for them within the supply chain where there's a need for them.
Great. Where are your facilities located?
Yeah, so we're headquartered in Toronto. We have our first manufacturing facility that we call a spoke in Rochester, New York. We have a new facility that will be up and running by hopefully end of this year down in Phoenix, Arizona. And then we're also growing our Rochester facility to have what we call a hub facility too. So it'll be a much larger footprint there shortly.
Made in USA. We love it.
So, Jason, I got a question for you. I think General Motors came out and said by 2035 that they're going to have their whole fleet of vehicles be electric, right? But there's a little bit of a debate going on. And I think your company is kind of solving this issue right now. So I'd like you to educate the listeners a little bit, right? So so GM said that they're going to come out and they're going to stop selling all gasoline vehicles by 2035. Audi said the same thing. However, we're going from a gasoline world to a resource world, right? We're pulling different resources out, like you said before, as far as cobalt and everything else that it takes to make these batteries, right? So we're depleting the resources in the world right now for these batteries. And if everybody's fleet changes, because I think Audi said it and Mercedes said it, they're all in a race right now to get, everybody wants to be fully electric, right? How you guys are extracting the old batteries and the elements that go into them, and then are you making new batteries and reselling them? How does it work with Li-Cycle?
Yeah, so one of the big appeals of recycling is sort of that resource stability. So we're able to take off these used batteries off the market, and we're able to recycle them and put them back into the local supply chains. So for example, for Chevy Bolt in North America, the raw materials in that battery come from all over the world right now. Cobalt comes from Congo, the nickel comes from other countries all over the world. But in the future, if the raw materials come from a recycler, they could come from us in North America. So once there's a lot of electric vehicles in North America and we're recycling, large volumes of these vehicles, we'll be able to put these battery materials back in the supply chain locally. And so we call it urban mining, where we'll be able to sort of alleviate some of that demand for these minerals that are in these politically unstable regions by recycling the batteries and creating a very sustainable solution to provide them locally.
It sounds like you're solving a problem the world needs right now, right? I'm definitely not the technical guy in this, but I'm actually interested in you a little bit right now because you're in business development right now. So essentially business development is sales, right? So how do you switch from that engineering mindset to that sales mindset? Because that couldn't have been an overnight switch and an easy process. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, I started out in engineering, and in my first job at General Motors, I love engineering and love getting into the details. But when I started that first job, I realized that just wasn't for me. I didn't see myself doing that for several decades longer. And so very shortly after that, I started pursuing MBA part-time. And by being able to do that, I was able to leverage my education to start moving around into different positions that were more business oriented. So first I was able to go into purchasing, then program planning, and then finally project manager and business development roles. And so I guess my one big recommendation for the audience is really pursue what interests you, especially for your career and what you're going to be working on every day, because I'm much happier now doing something that I enjoy working on, rather than still being a hardcore engineer. And some people like engineering, that's completely fine, but it just wasn't for me. So being able to use that business degree to move around was sort of how I began the switch into a more purchasing and then sales oriented role.
Now, how did it help you coming from an engineering family? It seems like you folks grew up in Motortown.
Yeah, so both my parents worked at Chrysler, and it definitely wasn't. It was a little startling for them at first, but they accepted over time. They saw that I was really motivated about it, and then once I was able to start leveraging it to get other jobs, they sort of saw the benefit, and they saw that my happiness increased. So they got on board eventually, but it was definitely took a little while, a little prodding to get them aligned with what I was hoping to accomplish with my business degree.
So now, Jason, we want to see if you practice what you preach. What car do you drive?
I drive a Tesla Model 3.
All right, good man. Now, how long will that battery be good for?
I think they warranty the batteries for 8 or 10 years, but I mean, a battery typically when it fails, it doesn't just stop working. You just get less and less range when you're driving an electric vehicle. So like most Teslas today, they go 300 miles. After 10 years, maybe they'll go 250 miles. You'll just see a slow decrease in the range.
Hey, Jason, I'm curious, if we were to buy, let's say, a ton of nickel from Congo or a ton of nickel from you, what's the price difference? Like, what's the market price in raw nickel extracted from Mother Earth versus recycled nickel?
Yeah, so once we start processing those materials at scale, we'll sell them at market pricing. So we'll be the same price as what they're currently sold at for when they're mined new. So we'll match what the market is. But I think the benefit for us is that our process allows us to recycle the materials cheaper than it is to mine them new. So I think we have an advantage going forward. So we'll be able to recycle batteries very economically, and hopefully it'll allow us to continue expanding and continue to grow by having that economic benefit.
Jason, I have to rely upon my partner because he's a lot smarter than I am. But Matt, is this a disruption play to enter the commodity world?
Yeah, it looks like you're going to need less natural resources, less mining, less people to do that, but depending on what their factories are. But I see it there. I see it going that way. I've never even knew the ion life cycle market, recycling market existed until today. So now you definitely piqued my interest.
Matthew, that's why you listen to the Liquid Lunch Project, to be educated.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's going to be a disruptor. As a matter of fact, as we were on the phone call, I was checking out the stock price, LICY, if anybody wants to know. So let me ask you this, right? So you were at GM. GM's a household company for decades, right? How was the culture different from being a GM to go into basically a startup?
Oh, it's very, very it's like night and day difference. So GM, they've been around so long. They have a process for everything. So if you design a component, there's a process to go through the steps of designing a component. If you're a buyer, there's steps to go through purchasing certain materials. There's processes, approvals for everything. Everything's written out. At a startup, it's like a blank check. There's a few recommendations of what we should do, the few templates of like forms we should use, but beyond that, it's figure out what works and do that. They believe in their employees to iterate and improve and innovate and find the best solution that works for them. So there's a lot more freedom and a lot more flexibility in the tools that we're able to use and the strategies that we're able to take advantage of to accomplish our goals.
So there's a lot less bureaucracy and red tape, right?
Yes, that's a short way of putting it.
So, honestly, it seems like when every company hits a certain size, there's layers and layers and layers. And I think it even works this way with the government these days. Just to get a simple thing done, it's going to take you a lot more time than just trying it out on your own, failing and trying something else out and seeing if it works,
Yep.
without having that, without having to worry about being reprimanded from the top brass, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. And again, getting back to the life cycle, even though I've been here only a short period of time, that's one of the things I like, or that I'm seeing, is that as we grow, they're trying to minimize that bureaucracy expansion, I guess you could say. They're trying to keep us a very flat organization. And I think that will be helpful going forward, because we'll still maintain as many of the benefits as being a startup atmosphere as possible, but we'll continue to grow and try to take the advantages of all the pros of different types of business structures.
Jason, I think you could use that analogy with all businesses, right? When you get to a certain size, the business becomes CYA, whereas where you are today, it's FIO, right? It's, it's cover your ass versus figure it out. Business at this level becomes like a naval analogy. If you have an aircraft carrier, you want to make a change, it could take 3 hours just to turn that bad boy around. But at your level, you guys are like a cigarette boat. You need to pivot, boom, done. I love it. You guys have a nice model. I think there's a long-term vision. There may or may not be a commodities play, so maybe you want to give us a call back in about a year or two and see where you're at. I think Matt's going to be shorting nickel for a while.
I mean, honestly, I think you guys are going to get bought out. Now, that's just me saying it, but I don't know. That's what
you heard it
like.
Here first, folks. You heard it here first.
Well, listen, it only makes sense. If every car company is going to this model by 2035, there's only a few players in town. How do you grow? By making acquisitions, strategic acquisitions. I think you guys could possibly be an acquisition target, especially when you get to that scale where you can sell everything at market prices. So it pretty much gives them they don't have to go anywhere, because they're recycling their own material, and a competitive advantage for any of these car players out there, and they have the capital.
Yeah, one of the things we're dealing with some of the automakers that we're in discussions with is they want to, what they call, close the loop. So they'll work with us to give us some of their manufacturing scrap or some of their end of life batteries, but they want to make sure they get those raw materials back once we recycle it. So they want, it's very important for them, not only just to get those raw materials, but they also like that they're from a sustainable process rather than coming from, the earth again. So there's multiple benefits, and yeah, we're definitely seeing a push from the auto manufacturers to make sure they are able to keep those materials in their supply chains.
Jay, let's roll up our sleeves and get down and dirty. How much of your potential resources come from American junkyards and scrapyards?
Yeah, right now it's pretty small. So most of our feed today comes from manufacturing scrap. So think from like when batteries are made, not all the batteries are perfect. So we get some scrap batteries that don't meet the mark. And then also as they go through the processes, there's a little waste, at each process, blah, blah, blah. We get that today. That makes up a big portion of our feed. We do get some batteries from end of life, but that's still pretty small. We don't see that being the majority of our feed for another roughly 5 to 10 years, because EVs are still a new market. So there's not that many out there. The other area we do get a lot of batteries from are recalls. So, GM's been in the news, unfortunately for them, with battery recalls, and there's some other automakers that have battery recalls. We're able to help them. We take those batteries off their hands and recycle them, and then we're able to process it and, again, bring those materials back in the supply chain.
And Jason, who's your competition?
Yeah, so the only major competitor right now in North America is Redwood Materials. They also recently raised money. Their process is a little different from ours, where we don't use any type of thermal, so we don't burn the battery at all. They do still burn off a portion of the battery. They do use some thermal type of process. And then beyond that, there's not many other lithium-ion battery recyclers that have really scaled up. There's a lot of small startups, but none are really at the scale that we or Redwood are at.
So I got to believe that because these larger corporations like GM are recycling, there's got to be some government benefits, some tax benefits for them to do this. Are there?
To date, right now, there's not, or at least not any that I'm aware of in the US. In some other countries, there are, like in Europe, There's going to be regulations about who has to recycle the batteries and how efficient that recycling process has to be. But at least in the US right now, there isn't anything like that. I do think what we're going to see is there's going to be more scrutiny about where the materials come from. And like I said, with recycling, we're able to localize the refinement and production of those materials. So I think that's where we're going to see some support from our government, because they're starting to realize that with all these new technologies, a lot of the raw materials come from basically everywhere else in the world. And they want to try to give us some stability in where these materials come from. So I think we might see some type of either incentives or assistance from that long term.
I love it, man. I love how the company's taking a finite resource of metals and raw materials and making it reusable again, because that's where the market, you guys aren't going where the puck is right now, so to speak. You're going where the market's going. And I think you guys are going to, do tremendously well over the future. And I appreciate you being on the show, because it's not always we get an engineer that, moves into business development that's actually doing something to change the world. And I love that. So thank you for being here. I do have a question for you. What's some advice that you'd give somebody that wants to pursue a career in the EV world or the ion battery space?
I guess the big thing is, having an engineering education always helps. But one of the things that helped me out start my career in education or in engineering, and especially electrification space, is getting involved with organizations that focus on that. So like if you're a younger listener, going to college, one of the big things is getting involved in like SAE type organizations to really get some hands-on experience. That's key. If you're older, you want to transition into the electric vehicle space, I think anything in the engineering world, you basically just got to attack it, take a first attempt, do something, get your hands dirty, and then you can build on that and leverage that to, move into a more, either a stronger role in electrification or something that's exactly what you want to work on. Get your hands dirty and really take that first step on anything, and then leverage that to find the role that really piques your interest.
I love it, man. From large company engineer to startup business development officer over at Li-Cycle. It's amazing. You're doing big things. But I have a question for you, right before we let you run, and I want you to let the listeners know where they could find you, how they can find Li-Cycle if they're interested in learning more about the company. But what does success mean to Jason Muccioli? I knew I was going to butcher that.
Nah, you're fine. I mean, for me on a personal level, it's happiness. Once I was able to change my career around, I've really enjoyed my work. And especially now, I like being at a company that's on the cutting edge of something, especially in a field that I feel good about. I'm trying to make electric vehicles more sustainable. So that's key for us. But for the company, our goals haven't changed after going public. We still hope to have the most sustainable process for recycling these batteries, and we want to be a leader in the space. And so, we'll continue to push that way.
Thanks, Jason. Jason, we thank you so much for being here, man. Guys, I think the company is going to get bought out, but that's just me. And you heard it here first. I'm just saying. But I don't own any positions in the company as of yet, but I might buy some. Just letting you all know. Anyway, with that being said, we appreciate you being here. We're just about out of time. Can you let everybody know where they can find Li-Cycle or get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks again, guys, for having me. So our marketing team's great. We have a website, licycle.com. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter. We have a podcast, Green Cycle Podcast, and then really any automotive conference. If you're a automotive geek, you can definitely find us there too. So a lot of different ways to get in touch.
And they're on the NASDAQ, LICY.
Jason, keep making the world a better place, buddy.
We appreciate you for being here. Thanks so much, Jason.
And thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of The Liquid Lunch Project.